I heard my brother's voice through the wall of unconsciousness before I could feel my own fingers. "Just sign the transfer," he said quietly. "She won't remember anyway." The machines kept breathing for me. My body was somewhere far away, but my mind caught every word. "My name is Vera. I'm 31 years old. I'm a forensic auditor at a mid-sized firm in Calgary, and the people methodically dismantling my life while I lay in a hospital bed with a traumatic brain injury were my older brother and my sister-in-law, the two people who had a key to my condo for emergencies, the two people my mother had designated as my temporary decision makers when she called them from the ER waiting room because she didn't know who else to call. 6 weeks ago, I was cycling home from a client meeting downtown. A pickup truck ran a red light at 14th Street and Center Avenue. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the ambulance. I remember waking up to the sound of a ventilator and the particular smell of a hospital room in winter, antiseptic and dry heat, and something underneath it that I can only describe as fear. The first face I saw was a nurse. Not my mother, not my brother. A nurse named Sandra who squeezed my hand and told me in a very calm voice that I had a subdural hematoma, that I had been in a medically induced coma for 11 days, and that my family had been notified I was improving. My family had been notified, they knew, they just weren't there. I found out 3 days later what they had been doing instead. My brother and I were never close, not in the way people imagine siblings should be. He's 6 years older, and when we were growing up, he had a talent for making everything about proximity to advantage. If I got good grades, he reminded our parents he'd paved the way. If I got a scholarship, he found a way to reference his own acceptance letter from a school he never attended. When I bought my condo in Beltline at 27, a one-bedroom that I saved for over 4 years, that I researched obsessively, that I painted myself over 2 weekends with a bad playlist and cheaper wine than I should have been drinking, he told our father it was a foolish investment in an overpriced market. He was wrong, as it turned out. The market moved exactly the way I thought it would. He knew that too, which is probably why, when he and his wife got emergency authorization over my financial affairs through a temporary substitute decision-maker designation, a legitimate legal mechanism in Alberta that exists to protect people who are incapacitated, not to exploit them, he moved quickly. Within 9 days of my accident, my brother had contacted my property management company, claimed I had decided to sell due to the injury, and begun the process of listing my condo. He had also accessed my main checking account, which my mother had naively included in the TSDM paperwork because she thought he would need it to pay my bills. He used it instead to pay 2 months of his own mortgage. He didn't sell my grandmother's ring. That's because he didn't know about it. He didn't know about a lot of things. Here's what he didn't know about me. I work in forensic accounting. I have spent 8 years watching people make confident assumptions about what they can get away with when they believe no one is watching closely enough. I have seen the inside of fraud cases involving family members, business partners, estate administrators. I know exactly what a paper trail looks like when someone is trying not to leave one. And I know exactly what to do when I find one. I also know that the most important documents in my life are not kept on my phone, not kept in my condo, not kept anywhere a person with a key could find in a weekend. 3 years ago, after I closed on my condo, I rented a private storage unit through a company in the east end of the city. Not a public facility with a padlock you can cut, a climate-controlled, individually alarmed unit that requires biometric access, my fingerprint, and a 6-digit rotating PIN synced to an authenticator app on a secondary phone that lives in a locked drawer at my office. Inside that unit, a fireproof document box, every contract I've ever signed, my grandmother's will, notarized, with a certified copy registered with the provincial court. A second copy of my own will witnessed by my lawyer. 3 external hard drives containing encrypted backups of my financial records going back 10 years. And, tucked inside a sealed envelope I labeled simply if needed, a set of instructions I wrote myself, addressed to my lawyer, with specific directions for what to do if I ever became incapacitated and someone tried to act against my interests. I prepared this not because I expected my brother to betray me. I prepared it because I grew up watching him calculate. When I was finally strong enough to hold a phone, I used the hospital Wi-Fi to access my secondary email, the one no one in my family has ever seen. I had a message from my monitoring service, unusual activity on my primary account. A login attempt on my property management portal from an IP address registered to my brother's home router. A real estate listing that had gone live 2 days ago describing my condo as a motivated seller situation, with possession available in 30 days. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after I read that. My mother called that afternoon. Her voice was careful in a way that told me she already knew something had gone wrong and was hoping I didn't. She asked how I was feeling. She said my brother had been managing everything beautifully, that I was so lucky to have family who stepped up. I told her I was tired. I told her I'd call her back. I didn't tell her what I knew, because I needed a few more days and I needed her to keep him calm. My brother visited once while I was still in hospital. He brought a coffee I hadn't asked for and stood near the window instead of sitting down, which is what people do when they're uncomfortable and trying not to show it. He told me the condo was a lot to manage from a distance. He said he was looking into options. He said he wanted to make sure I had everything I needed when I got out. He smiled when he said it, and I thought about the Auditor General reports I've read, and the depositions I've sat in on, and the particular texture of a lie told by someone who has already half convinced themselves it's reasonable. I smiled back. I told him I was grateful. That night, I called my lawyer from a borrowed phone, not the hospital phone, not my personal phone, a phone belonging to Sandra the nurse, who sat outside the curtain and pretended not to listen while I spoke for 22 minutes. My lawyer's name is Fiona. She has handled my affairs since I was 24, when I hired her to review my first employment contract, and she found a non-compete clause that would have locked me out of the industry for 3 years. She is not warm in the conventional sense, but she's precise, and precision is the thing I needed most. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How quickly can you give me written instruction?" I said, "Give me until morning." I stayed up until 2 a.m. composing a 4-page handwritten statement, dated and signed, documenting everything I knew: the property listing, the account access, the timeline, the conversations I had overheard through the fog of sedation. Sandra witnessed it. I photographed each page and sent them to Fiona through an encrypted file transfer. The listing came down the next day. My brother called me that evening, voice tight and careful. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said he was only trying to be proactive. He said the real estate agent had misread his instructions. I said, "Of course. Thank you for sorting it out." I was discharged 10 days later. My mother picked me up, which was awkward because she knew something had shifted but didn't know the shape of it yet. She brought a lasagna she'd made from scratch and helped me set up on the couch and didn't mention my brother once, which told me she'd spoken to him. I spent my first week home doing what people assumed was resting. I was not resting. My forensic training comes with a particular skill set that is genuinely useful in situations like this. I can reconstruct a financial timeline from partial records. I can identify the moments when someone's story doesn't match the numbers. I can also recognize when I have enough to move and when I need more. I hired a civil litigation lawyer, not Fiona, who does contracts and estate work, but a separate firm with a track record in financial exploitation cases. I paid the retainer from a savings account my brother had never seen, at a credit union he didn't know I used. I gave them the documentation package I had built over the past 2 weeks, the account transfers to my brother's mortgage, the unauthorized access attempts on my property portal, the listing that had gone live without my consent, and a screenshot I had taken at 2 in the morning of a private Facebook group where my sister-in-law had posted a photo of my grandmother's garnet bracelet with the caption, "Available, DM for details." That bracelet was not hers to sell. My grandmother left it to me explicitly in her will. The copy of that will was in my storage unit, certified and registered. I also found something I hadn't expected to find. My sister-in-law had created a GoFundMe. It had been live for 18 days. The title was "Help Vera Recover. Serious Brain Injury, Unable to Work." The description was written in my mother's voice, which made me think my sister-in-law had either consulted her or deliberately mimicked her phrasing to seem credible. It had raised just over $42,000. My disability insurance through work had activated automatically 11 days after my accident and was covering 80% of my salary. My extended health benefits covered my hospital costs. I had received no medical bills. I had not been consulted about the campaign. I had not given anyone permission to fundraise on my behalf. $42,000 sitting in a PayPal account linked to my sister-in-law's email. I sat with that number for a while. There's a version of me that would have called my brother screaming. There's a version that would have called my mother crying. I am not either of those versions. I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to my litigation lawyer. I wrote in the email, "Add this to the file." The funny thing about working in forensic accounting is that you lose your capacity for dramatic confrontation somewhere around year 3. By then you have seen enough to understand that the confrontation is not the point. The documentation is the point. The confrontation will happen in a room with a judge present, and it will be orderly, and it will be based on evidence, and the other party will not have the option to cry their way out of it. I went quiet for 2 more weeks. I answered my brother's texts. I let my mother bring me soup. I responded normally to my sister-in-law's check-ins, which had taken on the anxious frequency of someone monitoring a situation they're not sure is contained. I said nothing about the GoFundMe. I said nothing about the account transfers. I said nothing about the bracelet. What I was doing in the background was building the package. My litigation team filed a statement of claims 7 weeks after my accident. Causes of action: breach of fiduciary duty under the TSDM designation, unauthorized access to personal financial accounts, fraudulent misrepresentation in the real estate listing process, and civil fraud in relation to the crowdfunding campaign. We also filed a separate complaint with the provincial financial regulator regarding the unauthorized account access, and a complaint with the platform hosting the GoFundMe for fraudulent charitable solicitation. My brother called me within 2 hours of being served. His voice had lost the controlled quality it had during his hospital visit. He sounded like someone who had been very confident for a long time and had just encountered the specific experience of being wrong. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "We can talk about this. You don't need lawyers." "I appreciate you reaching out," I said. "Please direct any further communication to my legal team." He called back 4 times. I let it go to voicemail each time. The 5th call was from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it because I was curious. It was my sister-in-law crying, telling me I was destroying the family. I told her I wasn't the one who had taken money from a person in a coma. She hung up. My mother called that evening. She had, by this point, been fully briefed. I had sat down with her 2 days earlier and shown her the documents. Not as an attack, but because she deserved to know the truth, and because I loved her, and because she had been used in this too. Her name had been in the GoFundMe description. Her trust had been the mechanism through which my brother got access in the first place. She cried for a long time. She didn't defend him, which I had prepared for and which didn't happen. She said, "I didn't know." I told her I believed her. I still do. The civil hearing took place on a Thursday morning at a courthouse on 4th Avenue, SW. It was not dramatic. It was a room with fluorescent lighting and stacked binders and a judge who read everything carefully and asked precise questions and did not appear moved by my brother's lawyer's argument that he had been acting in good faith under significant family stress. Bank statements don't operate under stress. Transfer records don't feel pressure. A GoFundMe campaign with $42,000 in disbursements going to a private PayPal account does not benefit from context about family dynamics. The judgment came down 3 weeks later. Full restitution of the funds transferred from my account. Return of the garnet bracelet, which my sister-in-law had not sold and was ordered to surrender. Civil damages for the fraudulent crowdfunding campaign. The GoFundMe platform had already frozen the account pending investigation. The remaining balance was to be returned to donors, and my sister-in-law was ordered to personally reimburse the amounts that had already been withdrawn. The criminal referral was a separate process. The Crown Prosecutor's Office received the file. I can't say more about that because it's ongoing. But I can say that financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a serious matter in Alberta. and it is treated accordingly. There was a moment after I got the judgment notification on my phone where I thought I would feel something large, relief maybe, or triumph, or grief. I felt something smaller and cleaner than any of those. I felt like myself again, like the version of me who had sat in court-adjacent proceedings before and understood what the outcome of good documentation looks like. My brother has not spoken to me since the hearing. My sister-in-law sent one email through their lawyer requesting that I drop the criminal referral in exchange for a written apology. My lawyer responded on my behalf. The answer was no. My mother and I have dinner once a week now. She doesn't bring him up, and I don't either. There's a grief in that silence that I don't pretend isn't there. She lost something in this too. She had to watch her son become legible to her in a way she clearly hadn't been prepared for. I can't fix that for her. I can only be honest with her and show up, and let that be enough. My condo sold 6 months later, on my timeline, at a price I chose, to a couple from Red Deer who wanted to be closer to the mountains. I bought a 2-bedroom in the West End. I painted it myself over a long weekend in October. The walls are a gray-green that looks different in every light. I work in forensic accounting. I have always known that the most dangerous assumption a person can make is that someone they trust is not capable of calculating against them. The most dangerous assumption on the other side is that the person they're calculating against hasn't already thought of everything. My grandmother's bracelet is in a locked box in my storage unit. Some nights I take it out and hold it for a minute. It's small and a little old-fashioned, and the garnets are dark as dried plums. She was a practical woman who kept her important papers in order, and her expectations of people realistic. I think she would have understood exactly what I did, and exactly why I didn't cry about it until it was finished. I am not the person they decided I was when they thought I couldn't hear them. I never was. They just forgot for a moment who they were dealing with. There's a moment, sitting alone in a hospital room at 2 in the morning, where you have a choice about who you're going to be when this is over. I remember making that choice very clearly. Not dramatically. Not with clenched fists or a speech no one could hear. Just quietly, with a borrowed phone and a legal pad, and Sandra sitting outside the curtain pretending to check her charts. What my brother did was a betrayal, yes. But if I'm honest with myself, it was also a kind of mirror. It showed me in the sharpest possible light what happens when someone mistakes your stillness for weakness, your preparation for paranoia, your independence for isolation. He looked at my life, the condo I'd saved for, the career I'd built, the careful systems I'd put in place, and saw not a person, but an opportunity. That's a moral failure I can't fix for him. What I could fix was the damage. I think about the people who do hold in situations like this, the ones who wake up from something like that and decide the grief of confronting a sibling is bigger than the wrong itself. I understand that choice. Family is complicated in ways that don't get simpler when money is involved. They get louder and more tangled and harder to look at directly. But I also know that staying quiet in the face of something like this isn't peace. It's just postponed pain, usually with interest. The thing I'm most grateful for isn't winning the case. It's that I'd already done the work before any of this happened. Not because I saw it coming specifically, but because I understood from years of watching other people's disasters that the moment you need your records is never the moment you have time to organize them. Fiona used to say something similar, that a well-drafted document is a kindness you do your future self. I used to think that was just a lawyer thing to say. I don't think that anymore. There's something I want to be careful not to flatten here, though. Being prepared isn't enough on its own. Knowing where your paperwork is doesn't protect you if you fall apart when you need to use it. What got me through those weeks wasn't just the locked box, or the encrypted drives, or the storage unit with the biometric lock. It was the steadiness I had to practice, over and over, while my brother texted me normally and my sister-in-law checked in with that careful, monitoring tone, and my mother made lasagna because she didn't know what else to do. Staying level when you're angry and hurt and still physically recovering from a brain injury, that's not a skill you have automatically. It's one you build, slowly, through every smaller version of the same test. My grandmother kept her papers in order her whole life. She never explained why, it was just something she did, the way she kept her tools labeled and her pantry organized and her promises short and reliable. I didn't understand it when I was young. I do now. The garnet bracelet she left me isn't just jewelry. It's the clearest reminder I have that how you conduct yourself, with honesty, with discipline, with enough foresight to protect what matters, is the thing that outlasts everything else. Not the drama, not the confrontation, the work you put in before anyone is watching. I am not the person my brother decided I was when he thought I couldn't hear him. I don't think I ever was.